Then let's call the meeting to order at 5:36. Hope that a few other commissioners will join. The first item on the agenda is the agenda. Does anybody have a motion on that?
Move to accept the agenda.
Thanks.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Seguino, seconded by Commissioner Hart. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, that passes unanimously. And I'm slowly moving to board docs. The second item on the agenda is minutes from the March 15th meeting. I have a motion on that.
Move to approve.
Moved by Commissioner Hart. There's
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Seguino. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? That passes unanimously. And next up, we've got CNA. So I'm not sure who wants to speak. Brittany, if you're going to be leading, Skylar, but I will just pass it over to you all.
Thank you. Skylar, I didn't know if you wanted to make any comments briefly. If not, I can go ahead and get started.
No, I know that we're running a little bit behind, so why don't you just get started?
Sure. And I think I'm able to share my screen now. Is that correct? Is everyone able to see the slides?
Yes.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much for having us today. My name is Dr. Brittany Cunningham. I am the Deputy Project Director for the assessment of BPD. I am a research scientist with CNA Center for Justice Research and Innovation, specializing in the use of evidence-based approaches to support the assessment of law enforcement agency operations and promote organizational reform. I also lead our center's diversity, inclusion, and wellness plans and efforts. We are very excited to have started our work. And again, thanks for adding us this evening. I do have a slide deck to walk through, just to walk through what we have begun and what we will do in the next 2-3 months. But before I do that, there are a couple other members on the team here that I'd like to give the opportunity to introduce themselves. So maybe we could start with Julie and then go to Chief Monroe and then Chip.
Sounds great. Good evening, everyone. My name is Julie Solomon, and just very briefly, my background is as a clinician. I've spent a lot of years in the justice and behavioral health world, namely around CIT training law enforcement on how best to respond to individuals in crisis, jail diversion programs, specialty courts, justice-involved case management teams, spectrum of programs around sequential intercept modeling. I am also involved currently with the consent decree against the Chicago Police Department, and I'm serving as the associate monitor over the crisis intervention section. I'm also working with the Orlando Police Department and Montgomery County Police Department on also alternative responses to policing. So thank you again for having us tonight, and we look forward to working with you.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Rodney Monroe. I'm a retired chief of police. I started my career with the DC Police Department, worked there 22 years, retired, became the chief of police in Macon, Georgia, served there for 4.5 years before becoming the chief of police in Richmond, Virginia. I served there for 5 years and then became the chief of police in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I served there for 8.5 years. Currently semi-retired. I serve as the deputy monitor for the Chicago Police Department consent decree. I also have been involved in a number of other projects around the country dealing with police reform, bias audits. We're conducting one now in North Charleston, South Carolina. And I look forward to working with the Burlington Police Department and the fine citizens of Burlington, as well as city staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodney. My name is Chip Coldrum. I'm going to say that I'm the proud director of the Center for Justice, Reform, and Innovation at CNA. Proud because I get to work with these wonderful people, and proud because I get to work on projects like the one we have here today. As a background, I'm a social scientist and a sociologist. I've done mostly research in applied government and nonprofit settings. I actually spent 5 years as an advocate. I was the prisoner's advocate for the state of Illinois, so I have advocacy in my background as well. And as others on our team have said, I'm very much looking forward to this work. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. There are a couple of things besides introducing you to CNA and a couple of other members of our team that I wanted to walk through today. We want to provide a brief overview of our approach. So the assessment topics or the goals of our assessment, data collection, how we'll go about our findings and recommendations, and then conclude with a little bit about our reporting and presentation of findings, and then leave it open for discussions and any questions you might have for us. So in addition to the team members that just introduced themselves, we also have Mr. Steve Rickman, who is a subject expert in community policing as a part of our team. We have several analysts who are very experienced and well-versed in not only research and data analysis, but also racial equity analysis, community engagement, and public safety operations. And joining Chip as an advisor on this project is Dr. James McCabe, who is an expert in police operations staffing, as well as Mr. Mike, and I'm going to make sure I pronounce his name right, so Chip, correct me if it's wrong, Mr. Michael Giannacco. I always say it wrong, so he's going to kill me. Okay, thank you. So CNA is a nonprofit research organization and analysis corporation that pioneered the field of operations research. Our Center for Justice Research and Innovation, which is where this work is housed, has assisted over 450 law enforcement agencies nationwide. We are considered a national leader in law enforcement performance, as well as constitutional and equitable practice assessments and development of practical strategies to address shortfalls and gaps. What I have here on the next slide is just a sample of some of our most recent work. So work that's similar in scope and size. For more than 20 years, we've advised law enforcement agencies through restructuring and organizational change. Most recently, and what you see here on the slide, is work that we've done on conducting organizational assessments in the areas of racial bias, policy and practice review, and policing for the future. Here on the screen, we just have the examples of report covers for the Methuen Police Department, Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, Prince George's County, Maryland Police Department, Niskayuna Police Department. And as Julie and both Rodney and I think Chip mentioned, several of the team members are currently working and supporting the Chicago Consent Decree monitoring projects. So the goals for our assessment, first and foremost, we want to understand BPD operations and interactions with the community. We also want to understand community experiences with and expectations for BPD, uncover any evidence of implicit bias, organizational or individual, and any implicit bias in policies or practices that result in disparate outcomes among community members. We also have the goal to assess BPD staffing and workload. We do that by looking at a ratio of demand and availability of staff. We also intend to assess how law enforcement operations, policy and procedures impact historically marginalized and discriminated against populations in Burlington. And our number one goal at the end of this is really to provide evidence-based findings and recommendations, drawing not only from local best practices, but national alternative approaches to policing that are the best fit for the Burlington community. So I like to always show this next slide just to kind of show our approach to the work and what we're going to bring to Burlington. So in our assessment, we will combine objective data-driven analysis with subject matter expertise to deliver actionable, transparent, unbiased, and credible recommendations. When I say actionable recommendations, what I mean is recommendations that relate directly to BPD policies and procedures, are achievable given financial and organizational constraints, as well as align with community expectations. And we will write them in a way that can be assessed for quality and compliance at future points in time. Our project approach is based on a number of guiding principles, including providing evidence-based assistance with an emphasis on research. So that includes academic research, as well as documented lessons learned and best practices from the field. And we use multiple forms of data collection, including interviews, policy and development, and statistical analysis, which I'll talk a little bit more about here in a second. So in our approach to this assessment, as I mentioned, we will use several sources of data to meet our goals, including review of BPD policies and procedures, interviews with stakeholders and members of BPD, as well as the city, and we'll also look at administrative data. We are going to use multiple sources because that allows us to compare and deconflict data points, as well as minimize bias and remain objective. This will give us a sound understanding of what we like to call the ground truth. So the scientific evidence regarding operations and activities. So the ground truth of what we actually are seeing in the data. Talking a little bit more about the policies and document review. So we have requested BPD written policies and procedures, including training records and curriculum. We have asked for a sample of internal affairs and use of force investigations. And the way we analyze this is we look at policy and gaps compared to best practices, and we just do process analysis with those. In regards to administrative data, we have requested call for service data, field contacts, traffic and pedestrian stops, use of force data, complaint data, as well as everything from hiring, recruiting, promotion, and discipline data as available. And this is where we'll do most of our heavy quantitative analysis and where we will look at racial bias, do our staffing analysis and workload analysis to be informed by the policy review and our interviews. So going to our interviews, as I mentioned, interviews with BPD leadership and personnel, interview with key community stakeholders, interviews with city personnel. And we have already started to reach out to a number of those folks and have interviews should start later next week. So how we are going to go about developing our findings. So our team will outline key findings and targeted recommendations and what we called and what the RFP calls in a menu of services format. So we're going to recommend alternative approaches to response to calls, to support the reduction of racial, socioeconomic, and mental health bias while still meeting the needs of the community. We also intend to describe the challenges and benefits to any alternative policing practice that we recommend. And above all else, we want to make sure we're meeting the public needs. And this is where the work that Talitha and the community vision comes in, to where we will review their work to see how our recommendations can align with what the community has put together as their community vision. What we plan to deliver. So we will have a final report that we open up for public comment period. We usually do that by posting a draft report after we give it to our client. So in this case, the REIB office. We generally post it onto the city's website. We don't like to post them onto the police department websites just to, again, remain objective and unbiased. So we post it generally to the website of the city. We leave it open for public comment for about a week, to where we set up just a CNA email where anybody and everybody in Burlington has the opportunity to read our draft report, provide us feedback, and provide comments. And I think that's where I'll end today. I'll close by saying thank you again for your time and putting us on the agenda. We do welcome the opportunity to talk with you again very soon about our progress and where we are. And at this time, myself and the team will welcome any questions or comments you might have for us. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Shireen.
Yeah, forgive me if you said this and I was just trying to keep up. One of the slides was about getting internal affairs, some samples.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering how is that request made? Is the decision made by the police department as to what they provide, or how do you make that something?
So what we have asked for is a random sample of a couple of things. So we've asked for 2 random samples of use of force, including at least one with a person in the community who was involved in a mental health crisis, and 1 officer involved shooting. We've asked for 12 random internal affairs investigations that are non-use of force, and then 4 critical incident reviews if BPD conducts such reviews. So we have put in our request through the RIB office, and they are working with the police department to get us all of that information. But we have asked them to be randomly selected over a 5-year period.
Okay, 5 years. Thank you.
And that's also the data we've requested when I mentioned the calls for service and arrest, crime data, traffic stop, 5 years.
Thank you.
Not seeing any other hands immediately, I'll jump in with a question or comment as well, and then Stephanie. So one of the things that I think was less strong, if I remember correctly in your application, was the alternatives. I think you all have done a lot of really good work and have done a lot of great analysis around policing. And unfortunately, we don't have another group to do the alternatives. So I just want to make sure that that is a focus, that is going to be a focus in the report, and hear a little bit more about your strategy with that. With, again, I could be misremembering, but that maybe that's something you all are a little less familiar with.
Julie, would you like to jump in?
Sure, I'm
Okay.
happy to. And I'm assuming you're referring to alternative responses to policing, like co-responder programs, law enforcement training, those
Correct.
sorts of things.
Not just,
Yeah,
not just changing policing, but also having alternative models to uniformed police officers.
yeah, absolutely. And so there are a lot of different models, and you're probably aware of this across the country, that are best practice standards. And one of the things that is always helpful is looking at specific communities of what's going to, sort of meet the best needs of your community. And so one of the things that we look at when we're requesting data is, not only are we looking at, for instance, use of force data, but also use of force data against vulnerable populations, including people who are in, behavioral health or mental health crisis. And so we have when we submitted a very long data request for calls for service, we included a lot of those data components. So we'll be able to sort of tease out also not only perhaps if there are disparities in where use of force and arrest data is showing, but also helping to work with your community around what your community is wanting and helping to bring sort of best practice standards in around some of those programs. So co-response programs, you might have a clinician and law enforcement riding out together on certain calls. There are alternative policing programs that don't involve law enforcement at all. Sometimes there's a blend of those. There are a whole spectrum of programs that we will be able to utilize the data that we're pulling to analyze and assess and make some recommendations. We have heard, I think maybe someone said this, but we did listen in on the first Talitha report out, and heard a lot from the community members that were participating in that. That was very helpful to us as we're coming into this strength in comments around what they're looking for with alternative responses to policing. So that helps give us a lens as we're walking through this project. So does that help answer your question?
It does, yes.
Okay.
And Stephanie?
Yes, can you tell me, so you said you're going to be requesting data for the last 5 years, and given that 2020 is an anomaly, how are you going to handle that?
So generally what we do is, so sometimes we put like a time variable in so we can look at interactions, but the analysis that we're doing, particularly around racial bias, is a proportionality index. So what we do is we will look at the proportionality of a particular group and their arrests compared to their white peers, but it doesn't necessarily all the time depend on the year. It kind of just depends on the way we're going to look at the comparison is just the rate for each year. So what we will actually look at to see is if the calls for service went down in 2020. At this point, I don't know. We're just getting the data now. If it looks like there is a huge discrepancy, we can put in time variables, or we can note that in any report that we do.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I mean, because there are some things that will be different for 2020, like, the propensity for pretextual stops will likely be lower in 2020. And so I guess my concern would be that that could be given too much weight, or that might skew your results if you're looking at a 5-year period that includes 2020.
Yeah, I'd like to say that there are ways to account for that mathematically, but there are also ways to account for that just in terms of the way you analyze the data. So actually, in talking with James McCabe, who is our specialist for police staffing analyses, we've already decided to look at data before 2020 and compare it to the current year. So we don't have that, that anomaly. But I'll tell you also that a year like 2020 gives you some interesting opportunities to look at what some alternatives might look like, because the departments across the country are being forced to deal with issues alternative ways. So there is some value in looking at that data as well. But we clearly, if we make a comparison, we'll compare the current time to a time in the past that's comparable, so to speak.
Great. Thanks. That was helpful. Thanks.
Yep.
And then do you all have to hop off at 6 our time? Was that the timing?
I'm okay to stay on for a little bit. If there are more questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay. Because we're a public committee, the way that we do is we also give the public a chance to weigh in. And so we don't do back and forth on that, but we can collect their questions. And then if someone's around to answer. And then the second thing is I do think it would be good if, I think Skylar, if you're managing the contract, if we just get aligned on like what the role of the joint committee will be versus the role of the city of Burlington and the REIB specifically. And so clearly if you're around for that, that's helpful, but also we'll had time constraints, so I don't want to infringe on those.
It was just a couple members on our team, so we just wanted to make sure that they at least had I think Chief Monroe had another commitment as well as Julie, but I think Chip and I could probably stay on, and I'm happy to stay on as long as you need us to. So I think we're good.
Did any other commissioners have questions before I go to public forum on this specific issue?
Hi, this is Mila Grant. I had a couple questions. The first thing I wanted to just verify, our city unfortunately is having to deal with 3 lawsuits. I just want to make sure that you're aware of that.
So we have seen those in the news, and I will say we do have a couple of subject matter experts broadly, as well as folks who do have legal backgrounds, if we need to have them see how that may impact any recommendations, depending on how quick the lawsuits get settled or go through. But we do have that if we need to.
Okay, I just wanted to provide a little bit of feedback as a community member and as a commissioner. And one of my bigger frustrations with regards to partly to the culture of the department, but also something that I recognize is a, for lack of a better term, side effect of these lawsuits, is that there has not been able to be a frank and open discussion about data around use of force incidents on some particular officers and what additional training or what plan can be done to address that. There's literally data points that say in particular situations, at certain times of the day, this is likely to happen. And, asking for a plan for that, not being able to get a plan for that, and just having a feeling in the community that even though when you look at the total number versus all of the incidents or calls that the department goes out on, it's a fraction of a fraction of the fraction of that fraction. So the department on a hand just looks at it as a small number, but at the end of that number is a real person. It's a real person who's living in the community, has friends and family. There have been consequences to these actions that resonate. Empathy is a huge issue. So I just wanted to mention that. And I appreciate your time and look forward to your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So unless we have other commissioner comments, and also just wanted to point CNA, I generally use first names because that's what we use for the community.
Sure.
But if anybody would prefer to be addressed by their proper title, please just let me know. I don't mean to be disrespectful. If there's no other commissioner comments, then I'm happy to take, if anybody in the public wants to raise their hand, if you have questions or comments, we'll open up the public forum on this item specifically. And if anybody needs to hop off, thank you all for being here. It was great to have you and to get to know you, as we'll be working together for the next few months.
We do have a question in the chat. Do you have a list of community stakeholders that are being interviewed?
So we do have a list that's been provided that we have begun to reach out to. We are hopeful that we will get a good response. We are limited to 20 given our budget and our scope of work, but we do have that list. I don't have it up here on the screen, but we have a list, and I don't know, Skylar or Taisha, we're happy to share. What we do not do generally in our reports is name individuals who will be interviewed. We oftentimes will say organizations that individuals are affiliated with, but we don't give actual names.
Right, and I agree with that assessment. Thank you, Brittany. That we are going to try to be as transparent as possible in this process, but handing out a list to the public, I don't think is appropriate at this time.
Great. So just to wrap that up, sounds like we will get a list of what organizations are being represented and who's being interviewed, but not necessarily the people. The other thing that I would ask is if patients like the one you just gave, if you can send it to Chanel beforehand, just so we can get them up so that the public can see it themselves, that would be great. A few other things on the way that we're working together, which I did not talk about with Skylar and Taisha beforehand, so I apologize for doing this a little bit on the fly, but clearly they will be your day-to-day points of contact and managers. I have historically been doing sitting in on some of the check-ins, which I think you came at a little bit of an awkward time, but by no fault of your own, just in terms of we're starting a new city council cycle. And so it's a little bit unclear where we will be next week, although I think it may be a similar configuration. Similarly with the police commissioner, some of these folks will be potentially moving on and cycling on in the next couple of months. But so there's some question of, I guess, continuity, but definitely, I think it makes sense for chair and potentially co-chair to have offline meetings with you. So I just want to be clear to the public that that is a thing that would potentially be happening. We're happy to give updates. It's just a little bit more effective than a 10-person committee in terms of managing and knowing what's going on. The other thing is, I think it'll just be good to have milestones in terms of like if there's any decision points or like interim deliverables or findings that the joint committee can weigh in on as a more of, and recognizing it as a 10-person committee. So I know that's a big ask. So if there's like milestone dates that we can get in terms of a plan from you all and REIB, that would be helpful just because then we can schedule meetings for around that time so that it coincides with when you might be wanting some kind of feedback or input from us, or we can all just give the thumbs up for you all to keep going. Does that kind of make sense? And I'm looking both to Brittany and to REIB for this.
That makes sense for me. We do have a standing meeting with CNA, the REIB does, every week. And so Councilor Hightower, I can meet with you and Shireen, I believe. She's the co-chair offline after this meeting to try to talk about which meetings that you would like to come to and how to make that work out. But it makes sense to me to have you in on the loop as far as what we're discussing.
Any other commissioners in terms of thoughts on logistics and ways of working? Great. Then feels like we've got a pathway forward. I apologize, there's so many airplanes. I will go inside if it becomes too disruptive. It's just the first nice day in Burlington. That's above a certain temperature. Great, so unless there's anything else, I'm gonna give about 10 more seconds. And then other than that, I would close this item.
I would just offer that, you know, we will make a good faith effort to share things as we go along, as we learn things. I think I can say that safely. It just occurs to me that this project has a pretty short timeline. So I think we're going to be in a kind of a mad dash to get the data analyzed and get their recommendations in draft form and get the interviews done. So I wouldn't want to get your hopes up too high in terms of interim reports, but I think you'll find us very forthcoming in terms of talking about our progress. And if serious issues come to light that we think need to be heard about, we'll make sure that they're known. I commit to that.
Yeah, and my comment was kind of based on your technical approach. So you had kind of sectioned out by sections, and I'm not sure if those are consecutive or if they're like milestones. So to the extent that there are milestones, and I don't necessarily know what those are.
Sure. So the data collection, I broke them out just for presentation wise, but we do them all at the same time. So it will have to be cohesive and done at the same time, given the timeline, which is generally how we've approached it before. And it works really well.
Great. Great. Then thank you all again for the first meeting. This committee meets about every 3 to 4 weeks, or at least will probably as long as you all are still working. So yeah, just keep us, and if there is any information that you're sharing with us, just know it will be shared publicly. So flag that.
Thank you so much.
Very good.
Nice to meet all of you.
Yes,
Have a good
very
evening.
nice.
Great. So the next item on our agenda is a general public forum where anybody can speak to anything. That being said, usually we do that at the beginning, but we will continue to have public forums for each one of the items. So if anybody wants to speak in general, they can. Other than that, we will continue to just take comment on every item that we discuss. So the next thing that we have is an update from Talitha Consulting, which I will again hand it over to Karima and Skylar. And
hi, thank you. So there's a couple of team members that are still listed as attendees, and that's David Minke and Tiffany Pertiller, if you could add them as panelists. And I believe Karis is joining as well.
great.
Thank you.
And if you need us to wait for Karis and skip to another item, I don't know if we gave you all an estimated time and are running ahead of schedule. So happy to do that.
No worries. Yes, if you want to give Karis just a few minutes, I don't want to start without her. That would be great.
Great. Then along those lines, is somebody willing to move, to amend the agenda to move item 5 before item 4?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Hart.
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner.
Thank you.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. So we'll go on to item 5, which I don't actually have much of a presentation, but I've been giving this a little bit of a thought in terms of, and actually I did not warn Commissioner Hart, but since this is something that I'm bringing up, do you mind sharing this item, Shireen?
I'm happy to. Sure.
Thank you. I didn't warn you. I feel like in my freshman term as counselor, I've heard, some frustration in terms of like how independently the council has been working from the police commission on policing issue. And it doesn't seem like there's been a lot of collaboration. It feels like hopefully we've been able to avoid this over the past 6 months or so, just by virtue of we've had these regular standing meetings. And so in the resolution, the joint committee was never meant to be a permanent body. It was meant to be a way to work through some of the things that we've worked through and some of the different committees that are some of the different consultants that we've had. And so I am assuming that the joint committee will at some point end. I also don't think it's the best necessarily way to collaborate. And I also recognize that in terms of public safety, at least, there's a commission meeting in terms of the fire commission or board or whatever that is. I might be giving it the wrong terminology. And so one of the things that I'm thinking about is drafting a resolution that takes some members of all of the body to meet on a yet to be determined cadence, whether that's monthly or bi-monthly, where it's maybe, one person from the public safety committee, 2 people from the police commission, 1 or 2 people from the fire commission, to meet on a somewhat regular basis throughout the year to just discuss things between those bodies. And so to hear, I think the police commission thinks of that, what you think the cadence should be in the membership, and any thoughts.
Okay, so Soraya, do you want me to just entertain any discussion at this point? I just want to make sure I'm understanding. Okay, all right. So does anyone want to speak to that? Any question? Commissioner Randall, please.
Yeah, thanks. I suppose I'm not entirely clear on what the proposal is yet. So I will, or what the scope of that such a body would be, or what the purpose would be to some extent. I think certainly it's useful for the Public Safety Subcommittee to receive information from various public safety organizations. So I don't have a kind of concern about that. I don't have concern about how that information might be gathered. The concern that I have in general is that, again, as I've mentioned to you, Soraya, and to various people on City Council as well, I worry that City Council is not particularly clear about what they want and I'll just talk about the police commission now, what they want the police commission to do. And given that that many of the police commission's powers, responsibilities, and duties are granted to us by city council, it seems to me that a helpful thing would be for city council to try to establish clearly what it is that they expect this body to do. And so I worry to some extent that, that those powers and responsibilities and duties of the police commission should be kind of clearly granted independent of city council. Even understand that we are essentially kind of a sub-body of city council, but those should be more or less independent of city council. And then also those responsibilities, duties, powers should be clear to members of those bodies without needing to, or so the worry is that if public safety subcommittee is kind of continue to have some role in each of those duties, and those bodies don't necessarily have a particular purpose, right? That essentially that the worry would be that public safety subcommittee would continue to accrue the actual responsibilities that ought to be, properly speaking, vested in the police commission or other commissions. So I'll just worry that unless there's some clarity given before the formation of such a joint body, then it would just continue, I think, to make unclear exactly what you expect, what you, city council, expects the police commission to be doing. So I would want that clarified before the adoption of any such joint body. Otherwise, I'd worry about responsibilities being seeped out of these bodies and kind of accumulated in the public safety subcommittee. And then just finally, I think that given the public safety subcommittee is a 3-member subcommittee of city council, I'm not sure it's entirely appropriate for all those responsibilities to be just held by those 3 members rather than city council at large either. So that'll be my worry about that. So, thanks.
So Soraya, we have the entire Talitha team who's planning to be here. Do you want to entertain a motion to go back to Talitha and then continue this, or what would you like to do?
I will leave that up to you.
Okay. I think that this could be a robust discussion. So I'd entertain a motion for us to table this until we hear from Talitha and then return to it if there's a motion. Does anyone?
I'll bring the motion.
Okay, and that's a motion to table this temporarily. Does anyone else? Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Great. Raise your hands or say aye if you're in favor.
Aye.
Great. Anyone opposed? Okay, thanks. So I will pass it back to you.
Great. Talitha, great. Karis, great to see you here. And I will now pass it back to Talitha and Skylar.
Yep. Skylar, you have things you wanted to go first, or?
No, I think you guys can get into it. I'm okay. I didn't have anything planned at the outset.
So thank you, everyone. And I have here Tiffany joining us from Georgia. David and I are in Washington, and Karima in Florida. Tiffany and Karima, we're gonna tag team a little bit just to share our observation about a town hall that we had on March 30th, and it was a Tuesday, and we had, again, it was not hosted on our Zoom, so we don't have the screenshots or anything, but I see that the highest number of participants on that date, and certain screens are joined by 2 people, so it's not the head count, but people who were joining in, the highest number I saw was 52 on the participants at the bottom. We had, through Skylar's leadership, we had interpreters, in-person interpreter on Zoom present for Lingala, Swahili, French, and Somali. And we also had computer aided interpretation, like simultaneous interpretation service, where people go on a web link and they can see transcribed interpretation for Burmese, Karen, Somali. The sponsor, the tech company, was very generous. They gave us 6 languages, and we didn't pay for all of them. They were just very delighted to see a city very inclusive, attempting to be very inclusive, and they do work nationwide. And this is their comment: they had never seen a local city using their technology for a topic that's so near and dear. So the next day, the tech support even said that let's bring that in Washington State, because they are a Washington State-based tech company. With that, I also wanted to give an opportunity to my colleagues. Tiffany led one of the breakout groups just to share their observation. And so again, it's a very subjective observation, but from my end, my observation is that yes, though it was not flawless at all in terms of the convening or the, I call that it was a pilot convening. It was incredibly humbling to see people speaking their truth honestly across differences. We did not have any hey, mute yourself moment at all. And people were, whenever we tell them to raise their hands or we're trying to call on people, they spoke their truth. And then it was also very effective in that when we jump in and say, hey, you know what? This is the question. Let's come back in. How would you reframe your statement in answering this particular question? People were very accepting of that as well. So with that, I'm going to pause and see if either Karima or Tiffany can go and share your observations.
Yeah, so I'll just jump in first, Tiffany. I feel like out of the previous engagements, this one was very rich in comparison. I think that we have crafted the questions and in partnership with Zoraya and also Skylar, making sure we're asking the right questions. And so it was really evident from the feedback that we did receive from the community and some of the themes that are coming out about what the community's vision is for a safer and healthier Burlington, but also what they believe we need to do to get there. So I think that part was very productive. And Tiffany, you want to add in anything that you observed?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I was very privileged to facilitate one of the breakout groups. And I think what I learned from that time with your community is that there are very passionate people, and I'm sure you guys know that already, that there's not a lack of passion or concern for the topics that we're talking about. I do think that there are a lot of different ideas that bubble up from the community. Some of them are much more doable and maybe palatable than others, but I think that you have a community that is desiring to see effective change in their community and in their public safety network, and not only that, but also really wanting to work together as a community to come up with the solutions. And so I think it was a beautiful thing to see as they came together and supported one another and, seconded other people's thoughts and comments. I think that because I've been on several of these calls, that I'm seeing the same people come to the meetings and say the same things. And so for me and my group at Talitha, I would really like to, and for this group here, to really understand how we can get to other groups to make sure that all voices are being heard, because I think the voices that are being heard are important voices. And I don't want to silence them at all. I think what they have to say is truly important to the context of what we're doing here. But I think there are still voices, even though we did our best to be as inclusive as possible, still voices that we have not heard. And so I'm eager to hear those voices as well. That's it.
And to that end, Skylar, you can speak more about our next town hall that we are tabling. So how?
Yeah, no, I was going to say that's a perfect jumping off point. Thank you. So after hearing feedback from this latest town hall, we are planning to have a second one on April 27th, which is going to give us a really an extended period of time to get out the word as much as we can. We now have more functionality on Front Porch Forum in terms of being able to post on every city site. We're going to be able to make sure that it's posted onto the city calendar. With due time, also going to be working with counselors, commissioners, community members, the Racial Justice Alliance, pretty much everybody that can collaborate with us to make sure that we get the word out for these next couple of weeks, so that we can have the voices that continue to come to the table on this issue, but also trying to engage new voices to complete or to create a more complete picture.
That is our update. Any questions?
Go ahead, Shireen. And then Karen.
Chris, last time we met, there was a discussion because an individual called in from a Church Street, and we had talked about how businesses were going to be incorporated. And I think you had anticipated maybe there was going to be a separate meeting, and I know that's changed, but I think we need to be clear on what's going to happen, because you had expressed how important that voice is to you, that you hadn't heard it. So I just want to make sure that we're being deliberate about, because that it runs the gamut. I don't think we're talking about any one type of business. We're talking about businesses of every size and ownership style, but how what your plan is in that regard.
So Skylar can go, and then I will jump in too.
Yeah, I was going to say, my hope is that with this next town hall, we can engage different groups to have them showing up and bringing their voices to the table collectively, not just the business community, but all the communities that make up Burlington. But then also not related to the Talitha process. But I know we didn't really get into this with the CNA team before they left, but that they are, as planned of their stakeholder interviews, specifically the downtown businesses are one of the communities that they have picked out as a community stakeholder that they're going to be engaging with for interviews in a little bit more of a direct way. But it's my hope that now that we have a few weeks to really do some serious outreach on this latest town hall, that we can engage these different communities and have them all come to the table at once.
And Shireen, I will say that yes, in our last joint committee meeting, after I presented the findings, I was super enthusiastic, right? Because at the time, the information I knew, I didn't know that there are parallel process that I had in mind with CNA. And so just like we mentioned in our email, I am open to joining the CNA team when they separately engage with the business community. And I think that that's not ideal right now. Because it's not happening right now. But I think that just taking a little more time to be methodical, I think that would really pay off, to have both CNA and Talitha engaging with businesses.
Karen.
Just two questions. Skylar, do you have a time of day for the town hall? Either Skylar or anybody can answer that. I'm sorry, it's so loud here.
No, it's okay. My thought was that we would host it at night, just because in the past I've heard from people when you try to host a midday meeting that isn't accessible. But I'm also open to suggestions from folks.
Okay, and then thank you for that. And then the second question, it was, I see Jeff Nick is on the call, and it was similar to Shireen's. And I had not heard that there would be maybe some overlap, but one thing I did get when I was trying to help out last town hall was we were trying to communicate with people in the community to get more people on the call. And I did get an email address, and I hear CNA talking about an email address that will collect information for folks. That's actually really helpful, and a lot of people have responded to that. If we're communicating about this, can we make sure that that email address is there just in case? I heard from several folks that they didn't feel safe in the environment that we were offering, that they didn't really think public forum was a place for them to talk. So if we could really push both of those email addresses out, that would be, I think, really helpful for folks who get, individual, people will email me or text. So just want to make a big push for that so folks can give as much feedback as they want.
Great, and I'll jump in here. And I think part of that is, as I understand, I think we're still planning on doing a survey. So hopefully that'll be a good space for individual thoughts. And then I think Skylar, you might have just said this, but what time are we planning on doing the next town hall?
As of now, I was thinking that we would do it again at 7 o'clock. But like I said, if people think that there could be a time that could work better, I was hoping that would give people time to get off of their jobs and settle in a little bit. But I'm open to suggestions on that.
Yeah, I think just because we did the first one a little later, maybe doing it a little bit earlier for folks who that it gets a little bit late too, because I think it ended at 9, maybe the last one.
Yeah, I would love to see it start maybe at 6:30. I think we have a really nice lead time for this one, so people could really prepare for it. I also like the idea of possibly opening it up early so that we can start to get people like coming in, right? I really like to see us get, obviously we want to be increasing, as we just discussed, the turnout. So if we start letting people into the room a little bit earlier, I think that might be helpful, because we've had some issues with a lot of people trying to come in at the same time at the beginning, and that would cause a slight delay. But once everything gets going, I think it goes well. But just needing to kind of tighten things up in the beginning when we're starting and getting people access. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Yeah, and sorry, me and then Shireen. And I think the lead time is really going to help. I don't know if it was Tiffany that said hearing some of the same voices. I think that is partially just because like everything has been really fast, or is like NPAs, which just tends to have people who like are really plugged into the process. And the more lead time there is, the more advertisement there, like the more time it has to percolate beyond kind of the inner circle of who's paying attention. So I think it's good that it's at the end of April. Shireen.
I think I can wait. I was going to talk to the commissioners in particular, because that conflicts with our police commission meeting. And I just wanted to see if we can get folks to agree that we should bump that meeting to another day that week, or to the Tuesday before. And I just like a quick show of hands maybe from folks, if they agree that we should move it. I see Karen and Randall. Stephanie and Milo, any thoughts on that? I'm sorry to take up time with this.
Yeah, that sounds fine. I think just the sooner the better that you get the dates out, because
yeah, I'm gonna.
I agree.
Okay, all right, thanks. I'll talk to Jabu, Commissioner Chair Gamache after this meeting. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Shireen. And then the last thought, just riffing off of what I think it was Milo had just said in terms of like opening it, and that can always be like a fun space for like a poll, like as you come in as well, that you can then show the results of even as the meeting starts, where you've already collected some information or something like that.
Yeah, I talked to, sorry. I was just going to say, I think that's a great suggestion. I know that that's something that we're going to have to think about, because for instance, with the last town hall, we had opened it early, but just to kind of get all the translators that we had set and working on that, technology. And so anticipating that this is going to be a pretty big operation, because we do want to maintain that level of accessibility. So we'll just plan that in and hopefully, do that 15 minutes early last time. And so we can let people in a little bit earlier, hopefully have a big crowd.
That's great. sorry, and then I actually had one more question, which is just how you all are thinking about, based on, you know, like the business meeting or the business conversation, like if we're inviting folks and saying, are you hoping to do like affinity groups so that people can like discuss how it applies to them and kind of report out? Or are you hoping to do like more cross-cutting so that they're, you know, like more of an exchange of how people are feeling about it? Because clearly both ways have merit. So just curious as to what approach you're hoping to take.
Sorry, I'm on my phone. I can't see if somebody was unmuting to getting ready to talk. I know that you know, we're going to be leaning on the Talitha team to facilitate that, and that's their expertise. And so I'm always going to defer to that. I think that from my standpoint, my hope would be that we can cross-pollinate, you know, communities a little bit more, because I think that so much through this process, you've had different communities, you know, bringing their voices and having similar viewpoints, kind of operating in echo chambers. And so I think that it could be really healthy if we could get as many different communities and different viewpoints to the table as possible, all while being respectful of different viewpoints that we may not, you know, necessarily agree with or identify with, and hear people out.
Karis, go ahead.
Counselor, are you asking what questions, what different type of questions are we asking to the businesses?
No, just because Skylar had said that with the, like, that hoping to just invite the business community to the town hall. And that then prompted me to ask if we would be doing affinity groups. So like, are you a business? Are you an activist? Are you like a resident of this neighborhood? Are we doing affinity groups, or are we doing like random selection, I guess? I assume if there's a lot of people coming, there will be breakout groups, but I could be wrong on that too.
We hadn't really thought about it, really, because most of our questions are very general for anybody to be able to answer. But that's a great suggestion. And while I also want to maintain the understanding of intersectional identities that all of us carry. And so for me, depending on the topic and time of the day, I show up as a small business owner, or I show up as, you know, different things. So perhaps it's a great idea. Which affinity group would you like to show up for this particular topic, while also being open to the fact that public safety applies to most of us, right? The word public. So thank you for that suggestion, Counselor.
Great. So, sorry, and if there's no more commissioner comments, then also opening this up to the public to questions or comments.
Hi, if I could, this is Mila Grant, if I could just jump in for a moment. I feel that we just need to make sure that the business community understands that they're welcome. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes the business owners put themselves a little bit too separate from the community. I don't know if I'm making sense. So they have a business, their business runs in Burlington. They are a part of the community, but they're so used to having their discussions amongst themselves and not with the actual rest of the community. It may not occur to them to come to the town hall, because I think actually a lot of the questions that have been asked as a business owner, you can certainly answer them from the point of view of your business and how public safety affects your business. So I'm not sure we have to ask different questions. It's more of a matter of saying, hey, you know, you're a business, you're part of this community discussion, even though in the past you only discuss things among yourselves. Does that make any sense? I mean, I'm not trying to be rude or disrespectful to any of the business owners, because I know like a small business owners, independent business owners, of which we have a lot of, especially in our downtown and the old North End. They just might not think to jump into this conversation because that's not normally how they do things. Just food for thought.
I think that's something, I think that's a good point you're bringing up, Milo, but I think it's something that can be considered as the outreach processes move forward and making sure that language is included in the messaging for outreach. I did find in the last few engagements we have that, as Karis was mentioning, people wear different hats. So those different hats did show up in the conversation. So, but I think it's good to name it and include that in our outreach process.
And we want that, right, Primo? We want people to show up in wearing their different, I mean, even among our group, we wear different hats, commissioner, counselors, business owners. And so, Commissioner Grant, I just want to say this publicly, like you participating in the town hall and, you know, at NPAs. And I also want to tell the joint committee, your encouragement to different social circles that you associate really makes a difference. The testament was with the stakeholder engagement. I don't know if you all remember, we met the Tuesday night, and then on the Wednesday we had a stakeholder meeting, and you all got to work, and we got 46, like 26 total people showed up for the stakeholder. So all of you have incredible social capital and power to get people participate. So as Skylar work on getting the collaterals, publicity materials, and also template for social media, please share widely.
We've got Jeff. We had a question from Leah. Chanel, I assume you, I don't know if you did something to address that.
Yes, the question was about the way the screen was being viewed.
Great. And then we've got Jeff, Nick, if they could be allowed to speak.
Okay, Jeff, you're unmuted.
Hi, I didn't know whether to jump in here or not, but I thought I'd been listening to the dialogue, and I appreciate your thinking about adding the business community to the dialogue, or be a little more proactive about that. As you know, I'm chair of the Marketplace Commission. You know, I don't want to speak on behalf of all the business owners, but I know this past summer there was a lot of shock when some protesters were leaving the leaflets around town asking people to shut down their businesses in respect to what everybody was protesting about. And I think there may be some folks timid about stepping into this dialogue. So just keep that in mind. I'm even a little skeptical about talking tonight, so bear with me here. You know, we're thinking about really the atmosphere downtown and on Church Street specifically, but really all of downtown. And, you know, I'm having a hard time trying to figure out how you maintain just a pleasant environment without some law enforcement presence, be it a police officer or somebody else, but somebody else with authority. And I'll just share with you, I had lunch today on Church Street at the Outdoor Cafe, and we have 36 signs on Church Street that say no biking, no skateboarding. I witnessed 10 people on bicycles and one skateboard on the bricks. Some of the bicyclists, at least half of them, going at a high rate of speed. It doesn't mix well with a pedestrian, pedestrian environment. And so we're not talking about big thing, but this could be a big thing. I mean, there was one kid that was bouncing off the rocks and jumping over fire hydrants on his bicycle. And there was a stroller nearby with a baby in it. I mean, these are the kind of things that I'm worried about and concerned. And, you know, we have to figure out a way to maintain a pleasant environment where there's not, you know, other things going on that shouldn't go on. So that's really one of our main concerns. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Karen?
Yeah, I appreciate this discussion about the business community and Commissioner Grant's offerings. I think I do want to say the other thing that I was hoping, and I don't know if this group can help me think about how, I've heard from a lot of parents because Burlington High School is downtown. And so that's something that commissioners probably hear about other than me. I'm not the only person with concerns. And so thinking about maybe getting, I know Stephanie served on the school board, but just making sure that those voices show up if there are concerns. Because I hear, again, concerns that, I don't want to say it in public, I don't want to look this way or that way, but I think it's a big aggregate. It might be a small aggregate, but we do need to hear about that. For example, I hear, we need a presence, but I'm not sure, it's a police presence. I mean, we're talking about having CSLs and, folks of that nature supporting, folks downtown. So, and then the other thing I wanted to say too is, we live on North Avenue. My partner owned a business for 10 years on Church Street, and they are very much a part of the community. And it's kind of disconcerting to see, people think that they can't show up for these meetings and talk because, we really want to welcome that. So to Jeff and to others that have talked about the business community, that's our work. We need to show up. I just want to remind folks too, I will name it, I'll remind white folks that this is hard to do, to show up and say, we need to be heard because of racial disparities. We need to be heard because of racial inequity, but we're not there. At no point did anybody say you can't be part of this conversation. And I want to welcome people publicly to the conversation and encourage people, if there's someone that you feel comfortable reaching out to, let's do it. If it's so important, then make it important in your life and show up for these conversations. And these folks just want to help facilitate it. So hopefully there's public people watching that will feel like they can do that.
Thanks, Karen. Anyone else on this? Great, seeing none, I will close the item. Thank you, Talitha Consults, for meeting with us again. And I hope this next item, I think it was, I don't know, item 4, item 5. And just making sure, 1, 2, 3, we still have enough commissioners. Making sure nobody dropped off. Great, so I will pass the gavel back to Shireen.
Okay, thank you. So we had just started a discussion about Zariah's broaching the subject of potentially a standing meeting among the fire department, well, the fire commission, the police commission, and the public safety. And I think we had left it at Randall had spoken. So I don't know, Randall, if you were done, if you had anything to add.
I'm happy to pass it along to whoever else would like to talk.
Okay,
right now.
Zariah, I saw your hand.
Yeah, just to start to respond to Randall, which is one, yes, I think that's something that needs to be done. 2, I think it's going to be hard to do that quickly because I'm not in the middle of these conversations, but it sounds like there's at least some desire to change what the police commission is doing right now in terms of like giving it more authority. So I think that is a debate that will be had over the next 6 months. The other thing that I'll say, I guess, like in terms of purpose, is that I'm modeling this after on the like zoning side or planning side, the development review board and the planning commission have basically a smaller group of people who meet just on like proposing new ordinance changes to the ordinance, which then go to the ordinance committee, which is a city council committee. And so I think having something along those lines, that's like, if your work well, right now, I think of it as being centered around BPD policy, but if something needs to kind of pop out to like an ordinance level or a city policy level, having that be a more, I guess, cohesive process, or at least creating a process for that. And maybe that's not a committee process, maybe that's something else, but throwing that out there.
Karen?
So you did say at the beginning, Zaraya, that you'd be drafting a resolution on this to this effect? Okay, all right, thank you.
Randall?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I appreciate what you were saying. So yeah, I mean, on the one hand, I do think that for questions about ordinances, particular ordinances, it is important, or to have input from the relevant bodies, relevant committees, whether that's police commission, fire commission, et cetera. So I think that is important. But I think that's one of the things which is also, I think there's been some uncertainty in the past about whether or not, for example, the police commission is to be understood as having authority with respect to, or kind of be to appoint people with respect to police department policy or not. And there was some confusion, ambiguity about that in the past, where there are kind of conflicting documents both within the police department, which suggest that the police commission is primarily responsible for policy, and the city charter suggests that city council is primarily responsible for formulating policy. And then whether or not that, whether or not the responsibility for policy was delegated to police commission from city council, which has been unclear. And I don't see much I've not yet seen much appetite on city council's part to actually resolve that question. I see people just kind of relying on the fact that it has never been clearly established in the past as a way of not resolving the question in the future. So again, I do think that ordinances, city ordinances, which are clearly out beyond the purview of the police commission, it's helpful to have that sort of input. But things that might possibly be within the purview of the police commission, I worry that, like I said, there might be some mission creep where they're saying, okay, well, we're already doing city ordinances, we might as well just do work on police department policy within this body also, which again, that is ultimately city council's decision. But I would like to have that be an intentional decision rather than just something which happens as a result of the structure of this newly formed body.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Go ahead, Soraya.
Great. So I didn't know, I was under the understanding that the police commission was like completely and wholly and without debate in charge of police department policy. So if that's not the case, I wonder if that should be part of the resolution. But so just making sure I understood that correctly, that it has been up for debate over the past years.
It has. No, there's ambiguity about it, because again, the city charter establishes that that city council is ultimately responsible for police department policy. But then there are internal documents in the police department which suggest that the police commission is the source of department policy. And those two things can be reconciled if it's understood that the city council has delegated that authority to the police commission. But in my multiple time asking about this, no one on city council has been able to direct me to a document that, or to a kind of a formal decision that is in fact what the police commission is responsible for. And that ambiguity about whether or not the police commission is responsible for that has in fact been, I won't say exploited, it has led to misunderstandings in the past, including, for example, with most recently with the fair and impartial policing policy, whether or not, what role the police commission should have in the formulation or adoption of those policies, where again, the police commission was pretty much sidelined entirely from the fair and impartial policing policy because of that ambiguity about who was ultimately responsible.
Okay.
Stephanie?
Read my mind. I was about to, I like this idea, Zaraya, because we are at a moment of transition. And I think this would be an easier vehicle for communication between the city council and the police commission. So I think in that regard, that it might be actually a very helpful body.
Karen?
Yeah, I mean, initially just listening to it, and don't want to say anything to, I have recently been paying attention to how much the fire department and, you know, I like the suggestion of, because I do feel like there's just so much dialogue that doesn't include the stakeholders, and then we'll get to a certain point or spend time on something and it's like, oh, well, wow, I didn't even realize those folks needed to be involved. So initially just hearing it without a resolution to refer to, that part of the idea really really excites me, because as we move through current events, we see how interconnected different departments are as well. So I think that's really important.
I missed part of that. Sorry, I'm gonna jump in. I missed part of that because of my internet, but I think I heard general support from you.
Anyone else? I have something to say, but I want to give everyone else an opportunity. So Zariah, I really appreciate that you're having this dialogue with us. And I think if you'd be willing to, I would love for us to be able to look at what you have in mind for a resolution and go from there. But I am grateful to you that you're bringing this to us.
And if I can propose a next step is I will draft the resolution, I think, and then if you let me know when you're postponing your police commission meeting to, maybe I'll present it as an item there.
Okay. We'll let you know on that, certainly. Anything else before we move on? You don't need a motion for that, I don't think, in order for you. Okay. All right. Anything else? Great. I'm going to hand it back to you.
Great. Then let me get back to board docs. I think that, oh, sorry. So the last item on our agenda is equitable sharing. I'm not sure what to do with this item. I know that either Karen or Milo, and I apologize, I know somebody sent me questions, but I'm not I don't feel like we have a process for following up on those questions or a lead. I'm happy to offer up Audrey, so folks sent questions to Audrey that she can be the one to follow up. I think that's what I did last time, but that I even passed on the question to Audrey, or if she was copied on the email. So we have not put forward any kind of course of action with this. We have some data and information, and I think we had one or two questions that floated in terms of the other things that we wanted to know. So I guess I want to get a sense from the committee of, is this something that we really want to dive into, that maybe we can get some dedicated resource to doing research on and finding more information and moving us towards a decision? Is this something, yeah, I guess I want to get a sense of what folks would generally like to do on this. Go ahead, Stephanie.
I think there's a lot going on right now. So I think tabling it, but not putting it away. I think just with the consultancies that are going on right now, we want to focus on that and maybe just table it for 3 or 4 months.
Great.
And I'm assuming that if we did table it, we would, and say the resolution passed, for example, it might move, but we would still be addressing it at a city level in some form.
Right. I mean, I guess if we table it and then the joint committee dissolves, but there's a different joint committee, or, I mean, that body can decide whether or not they take it up. But yes, which is, I mean, a weird thing to ask, but I think, I guess part of this is more from the other discussion, but like when this joint committee will and should dissolve. I was kind of assuming after the CNA contract ends, but just throwing that out there. So we're going to table the equitable sharing discussion is what I'm hearing. Do I have a motion on that?
I'll move to table it until June.
Great. Move to table until a June meeting. Is there a second on that? Seconded by Commissioner Durfee. Any discussion? All those in favor? Raise your hand or say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. So for other business or upcoming agenda items then, the only two that we have ongoing from this will be both Talitha and CNA. In terms of what will happen before the next meeting, which I'm happy to schedule now, but I wonder if I should wait for the city council meeting on Monday. So if people are okay with a doodle poll instead, I'll probably go that route. So we know who's on it from the city council side. But in between, I guess, this meeting and the next meeting, Skylar should be giving, I guess we should get some update back from CNA in terms of milestones when they think they would like the joint committee to meet. From Skylar, just some information on how we can help push out the town hall happening at the end of April. Anything else I think that I'm missing? My partner just fell down the stairs. You okay?
Yeah, we're all right.
Great. Then, unless anybody has any other meeting agenda items, I would look for a motion to, oh, I do want to, before we, I don't know if this was done at the beginning because I was 2 or 3 minutes late, but Chanel.
Yes.
Am I saying your name right?
Yes. Thank you.
So we've got Chanel now. We have a staff member again, which is so exciting. And we're so grateful to you for taking us on because we're a lot of work.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you here. And yeah, thank you for being already so helpful on your first meeting here. And if you,
It's almost over. Go ahead. Yeah, you can.
Your mic's hot, Stephanie.
Great. Then with
people are falling down the stairs and
well, we kept it together for, an hour and a half, so we're doing good. A motion to adjourn would be moved by Seguino, seconded by Commissioner Durfee. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously, and we'll be in touch about our next meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah.